Russia-Ukraine War, List of Key Events, Day 340. Here is the situation as it stands on Sunday, January 29, 2023. Russia accused the Ukrainian military of deliberately attacking a hospital in a Russian-held area of eastern Ukraine in what it called a war crime that killed 14 people and wounded 24 patients and medical staff. There was no immediate response to the allegations from Ukraine. A Russian attack killed 3 people in a residential district of the eastern Ukrainian city of Koshchentinivka, the region's governor said. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky described the situation at the front as extremely acute, particularly in the eastern Donetsk region where Russia is stepping up an offensive. Zelensky reported significant battles for Volodar, to the southwest of Donetsk's regional capital, and Bakhmut, to the northeast. Weapons. German arms maker Rheinmetall is ready to significantly boost its output of tank and artillery munitions to satisfy strong demand in Ukraine and the West, and may start producing HIMARS multiple rocket launchers in Germany, CEO Armin Paperger told the Reuters news agency. Talks are underway among Ukraine and its allies about Kyiv's requests for long-range missiles that it says are needed to prevent Russia from destroying its cities, a top aide to Zelensky said. Ukraine has been promised 321 heavy tanks by several countries, its ambassador to France said. Poland will send an additional 60 tanks to Ukraine on top of the 14 German-made Leopard 2 tanks it has pledged, the Polish Prime Minister said in an interview with Canadian television. Diplomacy. North Korea has again criticized a U.S. decision to send tanks to Ukraine, calling it an unethical crime aimed at perpetuating an unstable international situation. Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Ryabkov, will hold a meeting with Lynn Tracy, the new U.S. ambassador to Moscow, early next week, the RIA news agency reported. Zelensky condemned the idea of neutrality in sports at a time when his country's athletes fight and die in war, while their Russian counterparts might be allowed to compete. Sanctions. Ukraine imposed sanctions on 182 Russian and Belarusian companies, and 3 individuals, in the latest of a series of steps by Zelensky to block their links to his country. The U.S. Department of the Treasury's top sanctions official on a trip to Turkey and the Middle East next week will warn countries and businesses that they could lose U.S. market access if they do business with entities subject to U.S. curbs as Washington cracks down on Russian attempts to evade sanctions. Conventional Russian forces are likely replacing exhausted Wagner Group forces to maintain the offensive in Bakhmut after the Wagner Group's offensive in Bakhmut culminated with the capture of Soledar around January 12. The Wagner Group's assault on Bakhmut has likely culminated with its surge on Soledar. Wagner Group forces in Bakhmut have not made significant gains since capturing Soledar around January 12. Wagner Group forces, particularly convicts, have taken heavy casualties in Bakhmut since the fall of 2022. One anonymous U.S. official reportedly stated on January 5 that the Wagner Group's forces have sustained more than 4,100 deaths and 10,000 wounded, including over 1,000 killed between late November and early December near Bakhmut. Russian forces are attempting to prevent Ukraine from regaining the initiative, possibly ahead of a planned decisive Russian offensive in Donbass. Chief of the Russian General Staff Valery Gerasimov stated on December 22 that Russian forces are focusing most of their efforts on seizing Donetsk Oblast, which likely entails Russian forces capturing key positions in western Luhansk Oblast and northeastern Donetsk Oblast to reach the oblast's administrative borders. Russian forces likely lack the combat power necessary to sustain more than one major offensive operation while fixing Ukrainian forces in western Donetsk and eastern Zaporizhia oblasts. There is no open-source evidence to suggest that Russian forces have regenerated sufficient combat power from their losses in the early phases of the war to enable Russian forces to conduct simultaneous large-scale mechanized offensives in the next several months. The Russian military has not demonstrated the capability to conduct simultaneous combined arms offensive operations since early 2022. Russia's most recent gains around Bakhmut relied on months of human wave attacks to secure territorial gains around Bakhmut by brute force at tremendous human costs. Russia's earlier capture of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk in summer 2022 also did not utilize combined arms, but instead relied on large-scale rolling artillery barrages to methodically destroy Ukrainian positions. Russian forces are experiencing growing artillery ammunition shortages that would prevent them from repeating these tactics. The Russians are thus very unlikely to achieve operationally decisive successes in their current and likely upcoming offensive operations, although they are likely to make tactically and possibly even operationally significant gains. Ukraine will very likely find itself in a good position from which to conduct successful counteroffensive operations following the culmination of Russian offensives before or during the spring rainy season, always assuming that the Ukrainians do not preempt or disrupt the Russian offensives with a counteroffensive of their own.